In the winter of 1955, a municipal engineer named Ren Claudel descended through a maintenance access shaft on the Rue Saint-Jacques in Paris, carrying a kerosene lamp, a hand-drawn survey map dated 1887, and a compass that had been issued to him by the Department of Public Works 19 years earlier. He was looking for a cracked drainage conduit that had been causing subsidence in the road surface above. The shaft was supposed to connect to a documented sewer branch at a depth of 11 meters. At 11 meters, Claudel found the sewer branch. He found the crack he had been sent to repair. He also found, behind a section of stone wall, that the subsidence had partially dislodged. A passage that was not a sewer. The walls were dressed stone, cut and fitted with a precision that no municipal drainage worker of any era had ever applied to a utility tunnel. The floor was level, the ceiling was arched, and at the far end of the passage, visible from where Claudel stood with his lamp held forward, was a door, not a maintenance hatch, not a utility panel, but a door with carved stone framing and iron fittings that had gone dark with age. Claudel was in that passage for 40 minutes. He measured its length at 34 meters. He counted 3 additional openings branching off the main corridor, each one sealed with brick that was clearly newer than the stone surrounding it. When he came back up through the shaft and submitted his incident report to the Department of Public Works the following morning, the supervising director read it, set it on his desk, and told Claudel that what he had described was a known historical anomaly, a remnant of medieval cellar construction, fully mapped, of no structural consequence. Claudel asked to see the map. The director told him the relevant documentation was held by a different department. Claudel submitted a written request to that department. He never received a response. He retired in 1971. He kept his incident report, his handwritten measurements, and a single piece of carved stone he had removed from one of the bricked openings, a fragment roughly the size of his fist, with a mason's mark cut into it that he had never seen in any reference guide to Paris stone construction. The official account of what lies beneath Paris is the account taught in every architectural history course that covers the subject. There are the catacombs, the ossuary open to tourists since the 19th century, the documented bone deposits relocated from overcrowded parish cemeteries beginning in 1786. There are the limestone quarries, the Carrières de Paris, from which the stone to build the city above was extracted across 7 centuries. There are the documented sewer tunnels, the metro infrastructure, the electrical conduit networks laid down across the 20th century. The official account is comprehensive, it is detailed, and it contains, for anyone willing to measure it carefully, a gap that has never been resolved. The documented quarry network covers approximately 300 kilometers of passageways beneath the city. The documented sewer system covers a separate and largely non-overlapping network of similar scale. Structural surveys conducted in the 20th century have identified subsidence and void patterns beneath large portions of Paris that are not accounted for by either of these 2 systems or by any other infrastructure on record. The voids are not random. They are not the result of natural geological processes. They follow patterns, linear alignments, regular intervals, the spatial logic of planned construction, rather than the irregular geometry of natural karst. The Department of Public Works has maintained, since at least 1920, an internal classification for subgrade anomalies that do not correspond to any documented system. The classification is not secret. It appears in publicly accessible administrative indexes. The documents filed under that classification are not publicly accessible. They never have been. Before we go further, if this kind of buried investigation is something you want more of, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it drops. The algorithm tends to suppress this type of research, unless you tell it otherwise. To understand what Ren Claudel found, and why the official response to what he found followed the pattern it did, you have to understand Paris not as a city built from the ground up, but as a city built over the top of something that was already there. The limestone beneath Paris is not simply a geological formation that was quarried for building material. It is one of the most extensively modified subterranean environments in the documented history of European cities. The quarrying alone produced a network of passages that, by the most conservative official estimate, would take a person walking at a steady pace more than 2 weeks to traverse in full. But the quarrying does not explain everything that is down there, and Paris is unusual in a way that architectural historians have never satisfactorily addressed. In every other major European city that was built on quarried stone, London, Brussels, Prague, the quarry tunnels follow the irregular, opportunistic logic of extraction. You cut where the stone is good, you follow the seam. The resulting tunnels are irregular, branching, shaped by geology rather than by intention. The documented quarry network beneath Paris does not behave this way in every section. In significant portions of the network, particularly beneath the oldest areas of the city on the left bank, the passages are straight. They run at right angles to each other. They were not cut to follow stone, they were cut to go somewhere. That is not quarrying, that is planning. And no official account of the Paris Underground has ever explained who planned it, or when or why those sections of the network were later incorporated into the quarry system as though they had always been part of it. Structural engineers who worked on the Paris metro expansion projects of the 1960s and 1970s reported in internal memoranda that were declassified in part in 1994, encountering prepared surfaces, cut stone walls, dressed foundations, leveled floors, in locations where the official quarry maps showed only unworked limestone. These surfaces were not quarry byproducts. They were construction. Someone had built something down there, not in the 20th century, not in the 19th. The cut marks on the stone, analyzed by a geologist contracted by the Metro Authority named Dr. Isabelle Fontaine in 1972, were consistent with hand-tooling techniques that predated the earliest documented quarry operations in the region. Her analysis was submitted to the Metro Authority as part of a routine geological survey addendum. It was not included in the published version of that survey. Dr. Fontaine's contract was not renewed. The first documented official acknowledgement that Paris contained subgrade structures of unknown origin appears not in any French government record, but in a private letter written in 1821 by a civil engineer named Etienne Marchand, who had been commissioned by the prefect of the Seine to prepare a comprehensive survey of the underground network for the first time. Marchand's final report, submitted in 1824, is 340 pages. A copy held at the Bibliothèque Nationale carries marginal annotations in a second hand, not Marchand's, that identify specific sections of the survey as incomplete or deliberately vague. In 12 places across the document, the annotations use a single French word, omitted. The annotator's identity has never been established. The annotations were discovered by a researcher named Jacques Lebrun in 1968, who was completing a doctoral thesis on 19th-century Parisian infrastructure. Lebrun published a brief note on the annotations in an academic journal in 1971. He received, in response, a letter from the Bibliothèque Nationale informing him that the annotated copy he had referenced had been withdrawn from the public collection for conservation purposes. When he returned to view it, the annotations were gone. The pages were clean, the same copy, the same binding, a different document. This is where Claudel's fragment of carved stone, the piece he kept in a box under his workbench until he died, becomes significant. In 1983, a retired stonecutter named Michel Garnier, who had spent his career working on the restoration of medieval structures across northern France, was shown a photograph of Claudel's fragment by Claudel's son. Garnier had worked on the Cathedral of Notre Dame, on 3 Romanesque abbey churches in Burgundy, and on the restoration of the Carolingian foundations beneath the Basilica of Saint Denis. He was not a man who speculated carelessly about stone. He examined the photograph for a long time without speaking. He said the mason's mark on the fragment was not French. He said he had seen marks like it on 2 other structures, both of them pre-Carolingian, meaning pre-9th century, meaning older than the oldest officially documented stone construction in Paris by at least 300 years. He said the cutting technique, visible in the photograph, was consistent with tools and methods that French medieval craftsmen did not use. Not tools that had been lost, but tools that had not yet arrived in Western Europe at the time the marks indicated. He said if the fragment genuinely came from beneath the Rue Saint-Jacques, it needed to be examined by someone with the resources and the authority to take it seriously. He also said, according to Claudel's son, that he was not willing to put his name on a written statement to that effect, not because he doubted what he saw, but because he had seen what happened to researchers who asked certain questions about the pre-documented layers of European construction, and he was 71 years old and preferred a quiet retirement. Claudel's son contacted the Institut National du Patrimoine in 1984, describing the fragment and its provenance without mentioning Garnier's name. The Institute responded that they would be interested in examining the piece. A meeting was arranged. Claudel's son brought the fragment. The Institute's representative examined it for approximately 20 minutes, took 3 photographs, and told Claudel's son that they would be in touch regarding next steps. They were never in touch. The fragment was not returned. Claudel's son made 2 follow-up calls. Neither was answered. He submitted a written request for the fragment's return. He received a letter acknowledging receipt of the request. Nothing further. Paris, 1961. Workers excavating for a new metro line on the left bank encounter a section of dressed stone wall at a depth of 8 meters. The wall extends beyond the excavation boundary in both directions. The site foreman halts work and contacts the Metro Authority. A representative arrives within 2 hours, an unusual speed for any bureaucratic response to a construction site query in that era. The site is closed to non-essential personnel for 36 hours. When work resumes, the wall section within the excavation area has been removed and the surrounding substrate backfilled with poured concrete. The foreman's log for those 36 hours contains a single entry, site assessment in progress. His log for the day work resumed contains no reference to the wall, the backfill, or the closure. When the foreman was asked about the incident by a colleague several months later, he said only that some things were not his concern and that he had a pension to protect. He did not say it unkindly. He said it the way a man says something he has already decided never to say again. Versailles, 1937. During excavation for a utility extension on the palace grounds, workers discover a stone staircase descending from the base of a foundation wall that predates the construction of the palace itself. The staircase is documented in a single internal memo by the Monuments Historiques. The memo recommends further investigation. No further investigation appears in any subsequent Monuments Historiques record. The location of the staircase is described in the memo with sufficient precision to be located today. It falls within a section of the palace grounds that has been closed to public access since 1952 for reasons described in the relevant administrative order as ongoing structural remediation. Beneath the 5th arrondissement, 1978, a team of urban explorers, the cataphiles, as they would come to be called, penetrating beyond the official tourist boundary of the ossuary, discovers a section of tunnel whose walls carry inscriptions in a script that three of the group cannot identify. One member of the group has a background in medieval history. He identifies two characters from the script as potentially Merovingian, from the earliest French royal dynasty predating the year 800. The group photographs the inscriptions. The photographs are submitted to a historian at the Sorbonne who declines to comment on the record. He tells them, informally, that what they have photographed should not exist in the location where they found it. When the group attempts to return to the location 6 months later, the tunnel junction that led to the inscribed section has been bricked shut. Fresh mortar. Recent work. This is not coincidence. This is a pattern. The French Ministry of Culture has never adequately explained why structural surveys commissioned by the Metro Authority in the 1970s identified subgrade void patterns across portions of Paris that correspond to no documented system, and yet those surveys' anomaly sections were stripped before the documents were submitted to the planning authority that had commissioned them. It is never explained why the annotated copy of Etienne Marchand's 1824 survey, a document held in a public institution, examined by a credentialed researcher, cited in a published academic note, was returned to the public collection with its annotations removed, or who authorized that removal, or under what administrative framework a national library can alter a primary historical document without any record of having done so. It is never explained why an official written inquiry submitted by a career municipal engineer regarding a passage he personally entered, measured to the centimeter, and filed an incident report about was answered with a reference to documentation held by a different department, a department that then produced no response to a formal written follow-up. Rather than with the simple production of the map, if the passage was in fact fully known and of no structural or historical significance. Why would a bureaucratic system with a measured response time of days move a representative to a construction site within 2 hours of a routine foreman's phone call, close the site for 36 hours, remove physical evidence, and leave the official log with a single entry if what was found was an unremarkable historical remnant already accounted for in the record? Why would fresh mortar appear on a bricked tunnel junction, recent, damp, clearly applied within weeks, in a section of the underground that no city worker had any documented reason to visit? 6 months after photographs taken from that location were shown to a Sorbonne historian who said what was in them should not exist where it was found. Why would a stonecutter with 40 years of experience in pre-Carolingian construction refuse to put his assessment in writing, not because he doubted it, but because he had watched what happened to people who said certain things about the layers beneath European cities that the official record does not account for? These questions do not go away because institutions decline to answer them. The honest answer is that we do not know with certainty what lies beneath Paris beyond the systems that have been officially documented. What we have is a municipal engineer's handwritten measurement of 34 meters of dressed stone corridor with 3 sealed branching passages, a measurement made by a man who spent 19 years doing this kind of work and knew the difference between a utility tunnel and something else. We have a fragment of pre-Carolingian stone that entered the custody of a national institution and was never returned. We have a 340-page survey with 12 marginal annotations, reading omitted, cleaned from the pages before a researcher could verify them. We have void patterns identified by structural engineers and stripped from the published documents before they reach the authority that commissioned them. And we have a pattern of institutional behavior, rapid response when a discovery needs to be contained. Silence when silence is all that is required, that is itself a kind of record, even when no record is officially made. Ren Claudel died in 1978, 7 years after his retirement. His son gave the fragment to the Institute in 1984. What remained in that box under the workbench? His incident report, his handwritten measurements, a copy of the 1887 survey map with 3 passages marked in pencil that do not appear on the printed version, passed to his grandson. The grandson is not a historian. He is a retired schoolteacher in Lyon. He has never been contacted by any institution, any researcher, or any archive. The box sits in a storage room in his house. He knows it is there. He has opened it twice. The official history of Paris tells us that what lies beneath the city is fully mapped, fully documented, and fully understood. A record of quarrying, of sanitation engineering, of the macabre repurposing of an overcrowded ossuary into a tourist attraction. What the omitted annotations, the stripped survey sections, the cleaned pages, the unreturned fragment, and the fresh mortar on a tunnel wall tell us is that the map of what is under Paris has more than one version, and only one of them has ever been made available to you. Subscribe and share this with someone who still asks what is underneath the official story. History does not disappear when it is buried. It disappears when the last person who measured it with his own hands is no longer alive to say what he found. Next week, I am following a thread that connects the Merovingian script photographed beneath the 5th arrondissement in 1978 to a survey commissioned by Napoleon III in 1858, a survey whose findings were classified within 6 months of completion. A cartographer named Duard Villein. One map, never published. You will not want to miss it.